Netcare has distanced itself from comments made by one of its surgeons on COVID-19 vaccines. So Dr. Susan Vosloo claimed that vaccines are unsafe and had many side effects that could, in some instances, be fatal. Take a look at this.
One of the major shortcomings of this vaccine rollout is that people are not informed of the potential risks of this. They're also not informed that there are other effective treatments. The vaccine is rolled out in a very mandatory way. There's no transparency. There's a lot of undue pressure on society to comply with this. This is totally in breach of any legal requirement where one is obliged to get free and proper informed consent from anybody that's being vaccinated, and that information should include particularly the risk of such treatments. The composition of the vaccine is largely confidential. It's like a trade secret. It's not possible to share it with anyone, like the spice mixture of Kentucky Fried Chicken.
There's unquestionably an uneven distribution of vaccines globally. Africa is at the back of the queue at the moment. But a second point, Africa is busy changing that. I think that the announcement that President Ramaphosa made in one of his family meetings around 4 or 5 weeks ago, that himself, the African Union and the European Union had reached an agreement. So this was even outside of the hands of the drug companies. Had reached an agreement whereby 60% of what gets produced at the Aspen facility this quarter 3, will go to South Africa and Africa. And then in quarter 4, from October onwards, 100% of what gets produced of the J&J COVID vaccine will remain on African soil. I think that changes the picture quite materially and places Africa in a good position moving forward. But the third and final point I want to make is ultimately we can go back and forth on these agreements, etc. But if we are not the ones with the license producing these products on African soil, then we are unfortunately not going to be the ones allocating and distributing these. So the key takeout message today is that Africa needs to...
Right, so 2 issues being raised there. The first, that's Dr. Vosloo, who was essentially spreading what is considered misinformation around COVID-19 vaccines. The other bite there from Nicolaus Stavros is around the inequality in the, distribution of vaccines around the world. Let's weigh in on both these matters, bringing the South African Medical Association, which says in part it won't support any medical practitioner facing charges of disinformation. The association's deputy chair is Dr. Mvuyisi Mzukwa, who joins us now via our video link. Doc, it's great to see you. Thanks very much indeed for speaking to us on the AM report. Let's start with the first matter. Dr. Vosloo's comments are worrying, regardless of who says them, but more so because she's a medical practitioner, considering the impact that this might have literally on lives.
Good morning, Ayanda, and good morning to your viewers. Thanks for having SAMA in your program. Ayanda, as you know, the South African Medical Association supports a vaccination rollout by government. It is what we have been calling for. Because we noted that COVID-19 is posing a huge risk to communities. Just yesterday alone, we have reports that over 500 people have died due to COVID-19. And we believe that if we introduce vaccinations, which obviously are supported by science and obviously verified in our country, by SAPRA, our regulatory body when it comes to health products. So we believe that the evidence that is there in front of us, especially in our context, is obviously leading us to support vaccination because we think there is evidence that it can assist in terms of calming down this pandemic.
We know that under the Disaster Management Act, the spreading of disinformation is actually illegal. So I guess in some respects there's a criminal case that can be explored with regards to what Dr. Vosloo has to say. But I wonder within the sector itself, what kind of sanctions there can be against medical practitioners who are essentially entrenched in spreading misinformation, disinformation around COVID-19 vaccines in a context where we're dealing with already such high levels of hesitancy.
Well, medical practitioners obviously are regulated by the Health Professions Council of South Africa, HPCSA. We have ethics, and our conduct are being scrutinized at that level. If there's any concern that a practitioner is not performing professionally or is against science as we know it, then that professional is taken to task by the Health Professions Council of South Africa. They can be reported there even by the general public. But also, as a medical professional, you are legally, morally, and professionally obliged to provide, a service that is supported by evidence, what we call evidence-based medicine. So this is what we have been encouraging our members to say. We are not going to support any, from a leadership point of view, any medical professional who really swims against the tide of science. We think that we all need to respect the science that is out there. If there's any issue that we have, there are so many platforms where we can raise our issues, including the issue of side effects. We know that SAPRA recently has made it a point that they create a platform where healthcare professionals, where the general public can, log in their complaints regarding side effects, so that those side effects are investigated, so that even the manufacturer himself is made aware of the side effects if there's any, as we know it.
If these kind of comments can come from a medical practitioner, it suggests to us that we really are facing an uphill battle when we come to trying to convince people that these vaccines are safe. From your vantage point, do you get the sense that government is appreciating this problem as a complex one, at least? Looks like our connection.
I think even though I wouldn't really...
Please go ahead, sir.
Even though I wouldn't really speak on behalf of government, but I do believe that there is some effort that is being done by government, to try and get there, to professional themselves. The webinars where these issues are discussed, where these questions are being asked and getting attention from the scientists themselves. But I do think that we still have more to do, especially the general public in the vernacular languages, and making sure that they are social media friendly, so that people can interact with them and ask questions from reliable sources, not just information that is circulated by unknown faces. So I do think that the government has still lots of work to do in that regard.
The other issue we were hoping to ventilate with you, Dr. Mzukwa, was the issue around the inequality of vaccine distribution across the globe. And that's because it's emerged in the last 24 hours or so that Aspen essentially, which we know is, I think, doing the full and finish stage of the production of vaccines here at home, was forced to be part of the, not forced, but is part of the manufacturing process, only for that to result in vaccines being sent to Europe before they were actually allowed for South African consumption. Aspen has come out to say that contractually, essentially, they are obliged to follow what Johnson & Johnson overseas has actually compelled them to do. But at the very least, the optics, Doc, look very wrong. How do vaccines manufactured in a country like ours go to a different country in a context where we needed those vaccines desperately?
I think, like you say, and I think we also have a problem of vaccines leaving the continent and going to the north. When we were introduced to the idea that there'll be massive production of vaccines in our country, we were of the view that that is going to assist not only South Africa but the continent of Africa in general. That is what we're not seeing at the moment. But we see a continent where people can just manufacture, do things. We take that medical waste and everything else and the exploitation thereof, and then the final product out to the outside world. It has been happening since the times of imperialism and also during the times of apartheid. It's really disappointing that in this time, in the democratic dispensation, we can allow exploitation of the African continent by now.
All right, Dr. Mvuyisi Mzukwa, thanks very much indeed for weighing in on these important issues. Really appreciate your time on the AM report. Dr. Mzukwa is the Deputy Chair of the South African Medical Association. Once again, thanks very much indeed.